Well, good morning, community. Welcome to GrowGetGive's podcast, Executive Experience. I'm your host, Aaron Avila. Today, Mike Skrypnek on my show as a guest. He's a 9-time published author, international speaker, a business strategist, and business coach. So I'm really excited for you to meet him. We have only 30 minutes together, so I'm going to bring him on right now.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Mike.
Hey, good morning to you, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, bro. I'm doing really good. I'm glad you're here. So you're coming all the way from Canada, in British Columbia. So introduce yourself. Let's start out the others. Introduce yourself.
Oh, you nailed the one-liner for sure. You're right. Business coach, strategist, author, speaker, but more so a family man with a wonderful wife, couple of young adult kids, and we live and play here in the West Coast between Whistler, British Columbia, amazing resort town, and Vancouver, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So living a life and taking on a fairly big step right now in our current life and kicking off a men's mental wellness movement. And we're going to talk about some of that today, I'm sure.
Yeah, mental wellness. We were talking a little bit about what is a business strategist and how does it impact? It has a trend. I can see it tying into the mental wellness because business strategists. I told you, it reminds me of what Jeff Hazlett said. And he says, I may not be the smartest man in the program, but I will be the most strategic. So tell me what a business strategist is. What is it?
It's someone who can see things from the outside that let's say the executives or the leaders, first of all, don't see objectively. They might see and dismiss things because they have certain emotions and connections to ideas or strategies. And then it's also we talked about this too at one point, the courage to connect the intelligence, the IQ side, the strategy with the emotional side, the EQ side, which is to understand which ideas are worth bringing up because you don't know in a leadership team from the inside whether they're capable of executing. But when you step in from the outside looking in and you can see the bigger picture, you're able to understand that, hey, this is a great idea and a strategic move for this company, but maybe it's not right now because this leadership team needs to deal with some other things, right? And a great business strategist understands that combination and then also can help people move to act. So I always like to say IQ plus EQ plus action, right? And then it equals impact, which is a company moving forward, people growing, business, personally, professionally, whatever it is. You stimulate growth. You're a catalyst to the action.
Yeah, Mike, and really what I picture, and you and I try a little bit in agreement about this, but a lot of times, me as a CEO of business owner, and I was self-employed for 12 years, I was far too reactionary. I would not say I was strategically poisoning my words to be correct. I would react. And I would say that would be one of the biggest killers I see. My Achilles heel in business was too reactionary. But what do you see as the limitations of what is a common limitation of someone that reaching their persona, reaching their full potential? What is limiting them in your experience?
Interesting. So this is we're going to get right into it right away. There are things that limit us that are tactical, right? We can We can tangibly see we're doing the wrong steps or using the wrong systems, or we've decided, we hired the wrong people because, and I say we've done that because as leaders or executives, if you're running a company, that's on you. You have to figure out how to hire right, develop the processes that are going to work best in your business and the system. So those are things that are, kind of on the surface. We can see them. We can understand the decisions we made to get there. We can see the alternatives. Those are things that might limit us in our business as leaders. But those are very fixable and very obvious. And then there's the underlayer. And these are things that maybe we don't see as leaders, as executives, leaders of industry. And these are the things that usually are identified by someone saying, I keep doing the same thing over again. Why did that happen again? Why do I keep repeating the same mistake? Or how come I keep hiring the wrong people? Or why did I do a business deal that looks very much like the deal I did before and the deal I did before and it didn't work, right? Or why are my staff and employees not having success? Like, why did I keep hearing this underpinning of negativity? Like, whatever it is, the leader then starts to have to look at themselves. And there are lots of reasons why maybe, just maybe, you're functioning subconsciously to subvert or sabotage your success. And these are things that you have no control of. And so no one is pointing the finger and saying you should know better, because maybe for systems, processes, and people, you should know better. But when it comes to the deeper subconscious behaviors, we don't necessarily know what's going on. And they might be linked to some significant things that might have happened to us in our lives. And I spend a lot of time in considering, contemplating, and sharing and advocating for men's mental health and mental wellness. And one of the key determinants of our behaviors gets solidified when we're kids. And what it really is the traumas we live through in our lives. And when I say traumas, now it could be your parents breaking up, divorce, death in the family, accident, could be abuse, childhood abuse, sexual or physical abuse, whatever it is. What affects us as kids gets hardwired into our brains in that developmental phase and creates neural pathways that are patterns for behavior for the rest of our lives. And we have no control of it until we get help.
Yeah,
I can explain a little more.
You have to be able to identify the issue. You have to face it. I know I have things in my life that I used to run from, and they've caused me to be that overactive, maybe angry a person. But once I began to face my fear, I talked about fear, and I sort of faced the thing that scared me, it made me less reactionary, made me more strategic. I'm curious, Mike, why do men in general avoid dealing with or admitting the negative behavioral patterns they have in their lives?
Oh man, this is a big one. Because we're fearful, scared, shameful, guilty. We feel a lack of worth. There's a good starting point if you want to really dial it up. But, for me, I'm going to give you a story about my experience and then translate it to that moment. And so here I was, 40 years, 30 years in particular, as an adult male working in business, finance, business coaching, male-dominated environments. And I was doing the same things over and over again. And that was ultimately finding the wrong men to align with who had visible flaws. And this is my key pattern. And that I thought, well, I can see their daggers, right? And so I can avoid the challenge. But what happens in business, and in particularly I was involved in the financial markets for 20 years, is there's cyclical, right? And so there's good times, and that might bring out some really terrible behaviors in people with greed, or there are bad times when people are under immense pressure. But either extreme creates challenge is when the men you align yourself with have flaws. And those flaws are exaggerated, and basically they ruin businesses, ruin lives, ruin relationships. And it's cost me money. It's cost me transition. It's cost me relationships for almost 30 years. And eventually I said, no more bad men in my life. Got to keep these bad guys out. And so I associated with good men, but transactional. I hired them as coaches, mentors, relationships in business that were all transactional. So I could always leave those relationships. Now, where did it all come from? Well, what I didn't want to admit, and what I had to admit, a year ago, just over a year ago, I lost a business contract. I'd been struggling for 18 months trying to get my business energized during the pandemic, and I was just struggling figuring it out. I lost this contract that wasn't really that big financially, but it seemed to mean the world to me, and it sent me spiraling into a depression. And for a 10-day period, every time I'd go for my walk, I would look at the raging river that is 5 minutes from my home and, want to jump in. And in fact, I wrote down on a piece of paper the pros and cons of committing suicide, of killing myself. And it scared the hell out of me. And so I got to a point where I desperately reached out for help, got a professional in my life who helped get me out of that moment, and leaned on my wife and said, I really need your help right now. And I began a path of healing. But what the healing was is I had to deal with the issue that connected it all. And this is the thing I'd been avoiding. I was sexually abused at 11 years old. And what I didn't understand as an adult who was determined never to repeat the patterns that got me into that terrible moment of suicide contemplation is that everything I did, I thought I had free will, was controlled by the patterns that were hardwired in my brain at 11 years old. Wow. And the last thing in the world I wanted to do was tell anyone my secret, right? Because I perceived the risk was too great in my business, that people wouldn't love me, that I would be even more worthless. Shit, I couldn't even go through with suicide at the time because I was afraid I might fail. I would hate to fail. I felt like a failure in life, but I would hate to fail at trying to kill myself, right? And, first of all, it was the love for my family that, kept me from making that tragic step. But the second one really was, I didn't want to be a failure at that. And so when I stepped back and started to get therapy and started to get treatment and started to get what is called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a big acronym, but it's EMDR. It helped me immediately. And that was to remove the shame, the guilt, all the emotions that were connected with this with many patterns, but one in general. So imagine this. You're an 11-year-old child raped by the pillar of the community, a decorated World War II Air Force bomber pilot, 35 missions over Germany, 6-foot handsome community leader, church leader, Boy Scout leader, choir leader. And he's the one who abuses you. And he abuses many boys. And so you hardwire in the nicest man. And I was selected to be a soloist in the choir. And so I was the best. And so the best man in the community picked me as the best opportunity for success. And then he abused me. And so for my entire life, I wired in this pattern never to trust the pillar of the community, never trust good men. And by not trusting good men, you can imagine in a male-dominated business environment that I was in, I never worked with good men. And somehow I pushed them away, I repelled them, they didn't want to work with me, or I sabotaged those good relationships, and I chose the not-so-good relationships that ultimately would unfold in terrible ways. And so I had this entire lifetime of navigating the waters with this subconscious thing because I wouldn't deal with it. When times were good, I said to myself, I'm a survivor. I was a victim, but I survived, right? But I never got any treatment. And then when I felt really low and vulnerable on occasion, I didn't want to show people I was weak. I mean, if I was in a competitive male environment, that if I showed weakness, people would come in and take my business, right? Take my livelihood. So there's so many reasons. And the other is I just didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be that guy who was the victim of a crime, of that type of crime. I didn't want to be known as that guy because I saw scandals out there, and from church to sport everywhere. And I'm like, I don't want to be one of those poster children. And so I avoided it like the plague. That's why men don't come to terms with some of their shortcomings, their abuse, their traumas. And that's because they're afraid that they'll be seen as weak, vulnerable, that they won't aspire to the patriarchal, violence, money, and, sex, all of the male prowess, right? That we've been trained to think is important. But what I really learned is the moment I disclosed I was 100% better and I was loved more people wanted to reach out, more people wanted to engage. And every day after that 100% better got better. And so I'm now on a mission to help millions of men understand this.
Really what we're talking about here is how a leader in a company, corporation, could be a very successful multi-million company. All of a sudden, the turmoil and chaos within the team can be a trickle-down effect of that leader being emotionally, I don't want to say damaged, but it's what he is. He's trained and believes it and has emotional issues that trickle down to his team.
I have the saying, troubled men make trouble, right? On a disproportionate level, men make more trouble for the world than women, generally. And when men disproportionately affect women negatively in that way as well. Men who have secrets and continue to carry these secrets don't understand that there's simple treatment available that will immediately start to create results that are positive. Now, there's a duration. If you've been traumatized over years, there's a duration effect where it takes longer to have successes. But there is a correlation, I think. There's no study on it, but that's my belief. And then you consider leaders. So men in leadership positions will never reveal their weaknesses, right? And thus they'll continue to support the culture of this patriarchal, male-dominant environment, right? Like we're just like men, no weaknesses, compete. And they'll do it to their own detriment. A good friend of mine and a PhD out of California State, Fullerton, Ryan Gottfredson, has written a number of books. One is recently one called The Elevated Leader. And what he said is that 75% of bad leaders have trauma, right? That's his research. That's his finding. And I don't doubt that for a minute. 1 out of 6 men has been sexually abused. 2 out of 5 have probably had some kind of trauma that they're living with. And it takes men 25 years on average to reveal that something crappy happened to them. And so if you have a bunch of leaders in a room, like you think about the board, the C-suite, and the senior leaders, and you got 10, 20, 30 people in that room, a couple out of 5, like maybe a handful, 4 or 5 of them are struggling at that moment. And so if they're not willing to talk and they constantly keep it bottled in, they have to deal with it in other ways. They become addicts, they have addiction issues, they have hostility, anger issues, and therefore become terrible leaders. They have family challenges, and they have relationship and business challenges. So these people who don't understand that everything is, I didn't get it either. I didn't know it was every pattern in my life was connected to what I experienced as a kid, and it was. And there's some good patterns, like I was stronger. I worked harder. I worked, through resilience. Like I did all that. That was part of my journey as well. But the negatives, when they rise, those negatives really destroy lives.
Yeah, I can see that. Earlier I said I could see that trickle down effect. it occurs. Where I personally, we have traumas. I think we all are programmed. I don't think people realize during their adolescent years how much that reaction, or our extreme reaction, is a reason for that. And it goes all the way back to when I was a kid. And I became extremely reactionary. And part of what we're talking about here, and I think it's true, is that you can help identify these patterns, maybe nip them in the bud, maybe suggest how to deal with them. But how can we as leaders help the next generation of boys become better men? How can we do that?
It's an awesome question, because that's what I'm doing every day. And that is, I'm committed to make the next generation of boys better men. And how do we do that? Is working with the leaders of today's adult male population so that they can become the good men they've always been. And one of the first steps in all of this is admitting to yourself that the stuff that you look back and you go, why do I keep doing that? Why does this keep happening to me? What have I done? How have I gotten into this moment? Like when you have those dialogues, or I'm worthless, I feel like I'm useless here, I have no value, right? When you have those type of feelings, which are very common, and that dialogue, you have to look at yourself and say, it's possible that the stuff I went through as a kid, the trauma I might have gone through as a teenager or a young male, is connected. In fact, I'm not saying it's possible. It is.
Yeah.
It is connected. Your brain wired itself a certain way to protect that young boy, young man, whatever, right? And it is not necessarily congruent with what you need in a normal, regular setting in social society, right? And so we need to first acknowledge that it is connected. Not it could be, it definitely is connected. Then we have to reach out to someone we love and trust in our circle and share with them what happened, right? What it was. And maybe it was your father sat beside you at the table every single night and called you a piece of shit. Like maybe it's that. Or maybe your parents died when you were young. Whatever it was, whatever that trauma was, you need to address it and bring it to the surface. Then you need to go from your loved one, that person you trust, and it doesn't necessarily, sometimes our family is not our best place, right? And take it to the next step, and that is find a professional that can help you. And I personally am extremely biased to a professional who does psychotherapy combined with EMDR. And the reason I say this is EMDR is a therapy that addresses trauma. It removes the emotional anxiety, pain, and stress that is caused by the word, our words. Like I have, my book talks about it. It's about the words that are connected to patterns. So my words were shame, guilt, fear, anger, worthlessness, right? And hopelessness. And they were connected to all these patterns that I didn't understand. EMDR helps remove that connection and helps us look at those underlying patterns, those behaviors. And once we can have those behaviors identified, once we become aware, we can disconnect that relationship between the emotion that's crippling or causes us to do stupid things in our lives with the patterns that were built. And once we can do that, we can start to reconstruct the patterns, right? So emotions like happiness, joy, feelings of authenticity and acceptance, like these things just can happen for us. Like normal, I say normal, everybody's got dysfunction, right? But it can happen in a normal setting, which means, there are people who've never experienced any kind of significant trauma. They're happy, stuff happens for them, in good way, they put off good energy, right? It's like they have no cares in the world. Well, that's because they're not dealing with these patterns that limit them all the time. And so once we remove that and start rewiring our brain for positive patterns, our emotions start to be disconnected from those patterns. We just experience them. when we have sadness or depression states, and occasionally, like we all do occasionally, they come and go. It becomes more typical, right? So that's really the key, is you disconnect these underlying patterns from these emotions, and you can start living through life with systems and strategies that you can use to deal with negative emotions.
Yeah,
it's just amazing.
That the people may be out there wondering why we're discussing personal matters about business, but I mean, there is a correlation. There is like you just said, it's not an if, it's for sure. There's a definite correlation between the business leader and the emotional trauma that they went through as children. And it doesn't have to be sex. It could be abuse. It could be physical.
Yeah.
It could be drinking. Sherry James is out there, and she's excited to see you. And I guess you're going to be mentoring her coaching on Sunday. Sherry James, thank you for being out there. Appreciate it.
I see. Sorry, I just saw the comment. That's awesome.
She's an awesome lady.
Done. Bringing some padding. We're a venture kit people, so we'll be out on bikes and we'll be out in the mountains too. Aaron, the thing is there is so much drama, sensationalization. We have a culture, a male-dominated culture where we don't foster comfort and safe place for men to have conversations. And so I hope that by extending my story in a plain spoken way, I'm the keynote speaker, I'm the author, I'm the business coach. I've been on stage, I've training people, instructing, all these things. That's my quivers, all the arrows in my quiver, right? I can go do that. And I'm not going to get on stage. I'm not going to make this massive, scandalous statements. What I'm going to do is bring the conversation down like this. And that is, we can make it normal, if you will, normalize the narrative. So the conversation is simple. You and we were talking about your injury, right? And the plain spoken nature you have about having a stroke injury. Well, men have very little problem talking about their knee injury, right? Their elbow, their shoulder damage, and they wear their cast like a badge of honor, and they limp around on their frickin' crutches, and they're willing to share every tiny detail about that injury with their buddies, right? When your brain is affected via trauma, physical or mental, psychological, it is still the same. Your brain experiences a neurological, physical experience that changes the way you think. So, why can't we simply say, we got an injury, and it just happens to be our reaction to protect ourselves, no different than the swelling in our knee is a reaction and inflammation. So our emotions become the swelling. And there are treatments like ice, like EMDR, to remove that swelling and pain. And then we can just deal with the logical steps to proper treatment, prognosis, and rehabilitation. And it works the same in our brains. We can have a normal conversation about that. We can talk plainly around the boardroom table, thinking, or the locker room, or even the green room, thinking, there's no consequence for me revealing this. I won't be held aside as a pariah. I will be part of the conversation. When we heal, like when my knee injury happens, I'm not losing my job. You shouldn't feel that when your brain is injured or you're dealing with a rehabilitation of whatever it is, that you should lose your job for it. And we need to give men the comfort that that's not going to happen. You're not going to lose your job. You're not going to lose your reputation. You're going to become part of a community that supports you and helps you get better. Because if leaders get better, they'll leverage on that to change the lives of other men and women and pass that on to the next generation of boys to change our culture. I mean, boys will grow up giving space to other men, other boys. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's huge. That's planet changing, honestly. It's world changing. Mike, we're down to the end of our show, but I really appreciate your time. Let's how do people I put your email down below in the ticker. But is that what are some of the social media ways people get out of you?
Yeah, Aaron, I hang mostly in LinkedIn. I'm going to blog almost daily in LinkedIn, share what I'm up to. So LinkedIn, Mike Skrypnek is where you'll find me. And my website, that is mikeskrypnek.com. And if you / unlimited worth or unlimited worth project, you're going to find me. You're going to find my podcast. The new book is still being pre-sold, but we're ready to publish for the first week of September. I can't wait. I finally feel like it's going to happen. It's been a month delayed, so we're making good time here. And Google my name and you'll find me. But LinkedIn and my website are where you're going to find all the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, okay, well, great. Make sure at the end, a bit later today after the show, if you have the links to your books, links to your assets, and people can get all of you. But I really want to say thank you for being, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I want to encourage you, audience, if you're in need, I want to bring your business to a different level, a more real level, then get on Mike. Definitely call him. Mike, appreciate being there. Thank you very much.
Aaron, thank you so